Hey, it's Jer. We're always looking to make this show better, so we have a new survey for podcast listeners only up at dailydetroit.com/pod survey. It's just a few questions, no personally identifiable information. It would really help the show out. That's dailydetroit.com/pod survey. And thank you. Hello, friends, and welcome to your Daily Detroit for Tuesday, March 7th, 2023. And oh my gosh, we've got a ton of sports coverage to get into. I'm Jer Stays, and joining me on the line is
Fletcher Sharp.
Geez, there's so much. So we're going to talk about the Detroit Red Wings with friend of the show, AK. We're going to talk about a local young woman who has done so well, Chloe Ricketts. Great story. Then we got that DCFC season kickoff happening at the end of the show. But before we get started, Fletcher, what's making you smile right now?
Making me smile and also making me frown a bit. Antoine Davis, we talked about him earlier in the year. Guard for Detroit Mercy Titans basketball program. His career might be over. He finishes like a few points shy of Pistol Pete Maravich's all-time scoring record, which I did not think he'd even get anywhere close to it this year. But he elevated his scoring output from averaging around 24 points a game to averaging around 28 points a game. I mean, the Titans didn't really have a much better season. That's really more so because he was the focal point of their offense by like a pretty wide margin. So if they don't make it to the CBI, the final tournament, which is like third division, you have to pay to go. If they don't get accepted to that, then his career will be over. He's one of the most talented scorers in college basketball history. And I know some people were kind of talking a bit of crap. They're like, well, he takes bad shots. He does. Okay, how many college basketball points have you scored? Like, I don't really need to hear anyone. If you've never played college basketball, your opinion on it's null and void.
You know, I had to laugh. There were some people throwing smoke at him about various things. One thing I saw, they were like, well, he's the coach's son. By the way, Pistol Pete played for his dad.
Yeah, Pistol Pete played for his dad, and they're like, yeah, well, Pistol Pete didn't have a three-point line. Pistol Pete averaged almost 40 shots a game. Like, I don't need to hear any, like, 40 shots a game is insane. It means you are not passing the ball.
Okay, so I'm more of a baseball guy than a basketball guy. And here's the thing. With baseball stats, although everyone says you can compare them, you really can't, right? Like, baseball eras are different. Like, Babe Ruth would not be the same player today. Like, it's just not the way it is, right?
Babe Ruth wouldn't be above the Mendoza line in today's baseball.
Right. So, with that said, there have been so many changes in basketball over the years. The athleticism, like, of course, people are going to debate anything because they will, but I don't feel like this is actually very comparable.
Pistol Pete averaged almost 40 shots a game, 44 points a game, but almost 40 shots a game in the no shot clock era. So they could have literally just held the ball for the entire time, and that's it. They played with like short shorts, man. Like, come on. That's a different era entirely. They played with the nut huggers. This is not today's era of basketball by any measure. Not taking anything away from Pistol Pete, one of the most fantastic dribblers of the ball I've ever seen in my life. He was doing stuff, modern stuff now, back then, and I'm sure he was like a demon on the court because they're like, what is this man doing? He made watching Utah basketball enjoyable, I'm sure, because I mean, you know, what are you going to do out there? But yeah, Antoine Davis had an amazing career, and to take anything away from him like that is just you being bitter that you were not taking those shots. The only thing I will say, which made me kind of cringe a little bit, is his final game, potentially against Youngstown State, when it became apparent that they were about to lose the game. Like, they were in the game for a minute. They kind of got close. Foul trouble happened. They had to switch some stuff up. Youngstown State was like, we're not going to let him score. So they were doubling him. Inbounding the ball, two guys on him, whatever. So that kind of made me kind of cringe a bit. He started forcing some really bad shots just to make a point. And I was like, yeah, don't do that. Because, like, you're not going to make those. It's only going to make your detractors sound louder. But, yeah, you score 3,000 points in college basketball. No matter what anyone says, I think you're a tremendous player. So hopefully he gets a chance to break the record. But if not, the book closes on a really great career. And whatever he does going forward, I'm sure he's going to be great at it.
Now, you were talking about end of the career. Now, you're talking collegiate career. Is there a chance you could get picked up in Europe or something? Obviously, we've talked about a bit about this, not the NBA per se, but Europe or somewhere else.
Europe, definitely. He's a 6'1", feather-light point guard. So NBA, like, unless you have the consistency of Steph Curry, who even Steph Curry is 6'3". Like, he looks tiny. Steph Curry is 6'3", like 185. He's a solidly put-together guy. So, like, 6'1", 165, like, it's going to be really rough for you in the NBA unless you shoot lights out. which sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. That's really not, what they look for in an NBA guard. But in Europe, he could carve himself a career in Spain, in Israel, push come to shove, maybe China, because they're always looking for American talent and they'll pay a lot for it. Russia.
Well, I don't know about Russia right now.
No, but they'll try. The Russian teams will give you a bunch of money to come there and play. I just don't know if you'll accept it and go.
Yeah, he probably shouldn't after looking at that whole Brittany Griner situation.
Yeah, be sure to check what's in your luggage before you get there.
Well, I appreciate you sharing this all about Antoine. Let's get next to AK, who is waiting on the line. We're going to talk about Red Wings. There's been a lot of fan interest in that, and let's get into it's not the end of the season, but it kind of feels like it. Joining us on the line is AK, one of the best hockey experts I know around town, that Fletcher knows around town. AK, welcome back to Daily Detroit. It's been a minute.
Hey, thanks. Happy to be back, Jared.
Oh, always, always. Look, I feel like we had this glimmer of hope for a few weeks here, a little bit of time, but is the door closed on this season, AK?
I would say yes. Even before the Wings won that hot streak, they had the second hardest schedule for the rest of the season. And now, you're losing Bertuzzi. Rasmussen is out. They traded Sundqvist as well. So your forward depth just took a huge hit. Verana, who really was never a factor, was also traded. The team, these last couple games, I was at the game against Seattle and over this weekend, when they continue to lose, it doesn't look like a team that's got the fire and the ability to really have a sustained push. They're struggling to score, which has kind of almost always been the case this year, but I think you're sticking a fork in the chance of the wild card spot.
When you look at these trade moves that Yzerman is making, are you supportive of them? Do you think they're generally the right path, or do you have questions?
I am supportive of them. I think Bertuzzi, and his name had been in the rumors for the last couple of years. Every time his contract was up, it seemed to be, arbitration, things like that. And there was never any rumors that he was going to sign long term this coming summer. It would have been great if, at this point, hindsight, if they had traded him last year when he still had a year left on his contract. A lot of times players get more return in a trade when they still have a season or two remaining versus just a pure rental like Bertuzzi was. But to still get a first rounder from him is great. And then the Hronek trade is pretty good value in a return. Getting a first and a high second, given that Vancouver is a weaker team. So I think that Yzerman is building around the young core of, you got Raymond and Sider, who are barely into their 20s, and you've got the other high picks that are just behind them. You've got Berggren, Veleno, and now with these other picks, if they choose to use them for draft, all these players are going to be within about 5 to 6 year span of each other.
Okay.
In age. So you're looking 5 years down the line, you've got a lot of hopefully good to great 24 to 29-year-olds led by Dylan Larkin, your captain. And that's when I think their competitive window really is going to be.
Now, Dylan Larkin, are you on board with how long they signed him for? It seems like when you sign that kind of contract, you're saying this is the guy and this is the guy for a long time, like especially, because he's captain.
Yes. It was a market deal. He did not really take a hometown discount. When you look at comparables, a lot of contracts and extensions are heavily driven by comparables, and recent ones where you've got a center who is, the first line center. Some people say, okay, or a 1B center caliber. They're signing 8 years at the scoring rate of someone that's going to be 65 to 80, 85 points a year. You're looking at, in the last few seasons, everyone signed for $8 to $9.3 million. He's right there. I know some people would love for him to have taken, a discount maybe closer to 8, but when you look at Bo Horvat, who just was traded from Vancouver to the Islanders, and he signed for 8.5, and Matthew Barzal, who extended, I should say, with the Islanders at 9.2 or so. He's right in there. He's currently still their best player. Is he an elite number one center? He's not in the top 10 in the league, but he's, in that next range. It's a deal that you got your captain locked up. He'll hopefully be here. And he does have a no trade clause, I believe, for the first 4 or 5 years, and it does shift to a limited no trade clause. But I expect him to be here the whole time. And he even said in his press conference, he hopes when it's time for his next contract, he's taking a discount to help the team add on to load up to continue their contention window.
Now, you mentioned that you don't think he's like a top 10 guy. Do you think he's going to be able to grow into this position a bit more? Or is part of this also his leadership skills?
I think part of his appeal is definitely his leadership, his desire to. He's got a great engine. He leads by example. He wants to be here. It's a hometown team. He went to U of M. He's never really played hockey outside the state of Michigan, which is incredibly rare for anyone to captain a major sports team and truly be homegrown. He's not a Connor McDavid or Austin Matthews or some of the other, like I said, top 10 centers. But with the right team around him, I think that he definitely can deliver. A team I look at is like St. Louis a few years when they won the cup. They had Ryan O'Reilly as their center. No one is going to say Ryan O'Reilly is like a top 10 offensive center in the league. He's great at defense. He is a good scorer and, great at faceoffs and he's a great overall good player with intangibles, but he's not someone that, okay, they're going to score 2 to 3 goals almost once every other week or something.
Sometimes players like that, I mean, maybe you want them to take a discount, but sometimes players like that are the players you need. Like, every team would love to have someone who can score 2 to 3 goals a game, grab a few assists, leave the game with like 6 or 7 total points. But sometimes you need your forward to, like, maybe he gets 1 point for an assist, but he hauls around the rink the entire game and just helps to get the team forward, as opposed to like maybe setting stuff up for himself.
Exactly. And when you look at a lot of the most elite players, some of them still have not won a cup. Connor McDavid, he's the best player in the world, and anyone who loves sports, even if they're not big hockey fans, should try to watch that guy because he is probably the most dominant player in any of the 4 professional sports right now and is very close to Gretzky. He hasn't won a cup yet, and he's got another player in his team who's extremely elite, Leon Draisaitl. Hockey is different than your basketball, where 1 or 2 stars can win a championship. So you've got to have a good team around them, and having your best player, quote unquote, be a smaller cap hit is better for the overall financial health of the team and competitiveness than saddling, 1 or 2 guys with $10 to $12 million contracts like you see in Toronto. Toronto has some great high-end offense. They can't even get out of the first round still. And if this is the ceiling as well, some teams like Boston, no one made more than Patrice Bergeron, who was their first-line center. No one made more than Yzerplan, besides Lindstrom, for example. If this is going to be that 8.7 or 9, the ceiling, then you're going to get Raymond and Sider, hopefully lower than that on their next deals and whoever comes after, which makes you a deeper team than paying one person 12, 13 million, unless it's going to be someone that is guaranteeing you 100, 120 points, and they're what puts you over.
Yeah, I mean, things are a little bit different than when I first started following the Wings, more than 20 years ago. Back then, there was no real salary cap, and so the Wings kind of just like bought whatever they wanted, and so like those Yankee-style days are over in the NHL.
Exactly. I miss them sometimes, but they are gone, and the league is not going back. It doesn't even seem like they're going to shift from a hard cap to a soft, cap with a luxury tax, unfortunately. So yeah, you've got to grow and develop your talent, that core. You got to draft. Drafting is tough. Hockey, you're trying to project a 17 or 18-year-old. What are they going to be 3, 4, 5 years? And it's very tough outside of those top maybe 2 to 3 picks to know who's going to be a star. Yeah, I mean, half a decade later, sometimes.
Yeah, it's a skill, and it is very difficult, and sometimes things happen that are out of your control. So a number of fans have kind of shared over the last, few months that they're a little frustrated with this season. Are you frustrated with this season at all, AK? Or are you thinking this is where we're supposed to be at?
I believe Yzerplan, he was not going to allow the team to continue the performance they had last season, where they were just getting the wheels beat off and they were losing 10-2, 8-1. I mean, these blowouts that it was just incredibly ugly. When you see the change in coaching and they brought in some veterans, and what he said is you're hoping to make the playoffs, but it's what they added on. If everything went well, maybe they do. Maybe right now they are in the playoffs, because you also look at Bertuzzi was injured for the vast majority of the year. When he came back each time, he was recovering from an injury. Jacob Verana had his entry into the player assistance program. So right there are 2 of your top 6 forwards that probably would have combined for an additional maybe 3 to 4 wins this year with their addition that weren't there. So that will put them higher up, even though every team does have injuries or people miss, but a lot had to go well for this team to be a bubble team. And you've seen the growth in Joe Valeno, Michael Rasmussen, Berggren, who came up from Grand Rapids, has been great. He's got a great points per game rate. So I think you're seeing that growth of that younger core, but I never really thought that this team was going to be anything more than maybe they're going to sneak in at 7 or 8 seed.
I mean, that's kind of how I felt about the Pistons in the city as well. Is like they're a team full of young players, a few veterans. They have a coach who's really just tasked with getting them developed. And if they make the playoffs, awesome. If they don't make the playoffs, we can grow. And kind of like you said, they had Bertuzzi who was injured. With the Pistons, Cade Cunningham got hurt and kind of derailed most of their plans. Where it's like, all right, we're not making the playoffs at all. Cool, let's look at the draft and hope we can go forward. It's kind of funny how a lot of the sports teams in the city can be so different, but also be almost exactly the same at their core and kind of build in very similar ways and kind of fall apart in the same similar ways. Here's honestly hoping that, stuff can turn around so we can go back to being the Detroit sports town of old when we were growing up, when everyone was good, or at least competing versus, looking up through the sports pages and seeing, oh, the Wings lost 6-1, and then the Pistons lost by 20 points, and then the Tigers lost by 9, and the Lions somehow were winning with, 10 minutes left and ended up losing by 50 points. So let's hope we can jump forward into progress in the sports town that we all love.
For sure, for sure. So before I let you go, AK, are we believing in the Yzerplan? Should we believe in the Yzerplan? Are we still on board?
I firmly believe. I think people should, because you need to look at, since the cap was enacted, and obviously there were teams that had there's legacy contracts and the like, but after those first 3 to 4 years, you look at the teams that were contenders, how long it took for them to be bad and the luck that may have come across. And then you look at teams that have not won still and just now are becoming competitive, how long they were bad for as well. It takes a lot of time because you have that, let's say, 3 to 7 year time frame from a draft to someone's really being a productive player. You look at the Lightning, who Eisman was a GM of. They had Victor Hedman, who's one of the best defense in the league. It was 10 years or a little bit more from when he came in the league to when he won his first cup. So Moritz Seider, he's only in his second season. It might be another 6 years just before they're really a cup contender because it's going to take time to build around them.
Okay, so patience is the word.
Yes. If anyone that knows hockey looks at the free agent market, for example, this coming summer, there's nothing. It's desolate. Even trades, it's very tough to build through trades. You've got to draft and develop in a hard cap league because then you have built in those economics where you can get your players typically on a better, more cost-controlled basis than going out for the 1 or 2 big fish that are on the trade or the free agent market. It's just not feasible in this league with this cap.
All right. Well, AK, thank you so much. I really do appreciate you.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah. Is there anywhere people can follow you?
They can follow me on Twitter at Mr. Adrian Keith, Mr. MrAdrianKeith, and the same on Instagram. I don't do much posting, mostly just hockey, sometimes food, cocktails, and travel, things like that. But I'm always down to talk about Red Wings and hockey in general.
Oh, 100%. Our audience is all about food, cocktails, and travel and such. So I think you'll find some new friends. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time on Daily Detroit.
Thank you both. Have a good one.
Fletcher, before we get into Detroit City FC, there's another soccer story I want to talk about. It has made national headlines this week. Chloe Ricketts, Michigan's success story in so many ways, and her age. Oh my gosh. I'm so impressed.
Yeah, Chloe Ricketts, 15 years old, the youngest player ever signed to a contract in NWSL history. That's the Women's Premier League in this country. And she's worth it. I wouldn't just say that out of the blue because while I do root for people for the state, I need to see you. I've watched her 3 times in person this past summer for AFC Ann Arbor when she was 14. And in her first game, in the first month of her career as not a high school player, she won goal of the month. And I think that goal of the month might have won goal of the year for the league. If not, it was in top 3 contention. She's really talented on the ball. I know you see your age, 15, and you talk to her and she sounds like someone who's probably on late to like their biochem class, but like on the ball playing, you'd have no idea how old she is. She's quick, she's devastating. She plays forward. She plays the way that I would like to see someone play if they're a midfielder or an attacking player, which is downhill. Instead of going side to side, all the little fancy moves, her moves move her up and down the field, forward and only backward. No side to side. There's no filler in her game. When she signed to Washington Spirit's preseason roster, I hit up a lot of my friends in DC and I was like, hey, she's making your team. Like, you should get familiar with her name right now. And they're like, well, she's only 15. And I'm like, I don't care how old. She could be 10. But the skills she has is amazing. To put in perspective how great she was, AFC Ann Arbor came to Hamtramck to play against Detroit City FC's women's team. They lost that game. Chloe had like a pretty decent game, but not a great game. And all the fans were like heckling, like, oh, we got her. She wasn't that good. What happened? And it's like, oh, my dog died before the game. And they're like, she's playing through grief and she almost single-handedly willed them to a victory. Yeah, she's really good. I guess we should be quiet.
I mean, I am personally kind of glad that she will not be coming to Keyworth with AFC Ann Arbor, because that's a good thing for the Detroit City FC team, but it's something really to be proud of as far as everything that's happening. And I'm just so glad to see the success. People don't realize, and we'll talk about the women's teams, sometimes with Detroit City and things like that. Women's soccer is a juggernaut. It is amazing in this country. So I feel like there's so far that Chloe can go in this country when it comes to women's soccer. It's far different than the men's side.
Especially when you go to a team like Washington Spirit, who just took another very young player a few years ago, not as young as Chloe, but a young player in Trinity Rodman, daughter of former Piston Dennis Rodman, and she's developed into like a superstar. She's one of their best players. So if you can go to the NWSL, unlike other soccer leagues for men in the world, where like soccer in England or Brazil or Spain is like better than the US, women's soccer in the US is like the best. Maybe France is like right by there in the domestic league, but like it's really not super, super close. So if you can break into this league and be a star in the NWSL, it springboards you onto the national team. If you're on the national team, it means you're one of the top 20-something women's players in the world. And like Chloe's been on every youth level that she's able to achieve. She's been able to get there and play. That's showing you how great of a player she is. I mean, heck, to give her like some competition, they had her play with the boys before she got signed, and she was dominating them too. Gender be damned, like she'll put the ball between your legs and go right by you.
For sure. I believe it's a 3-year deal. She's going to be living with, like an adult guardian. She can't be traded unless her approval and her guardian's approval. So there's some very like specific things for signing this, which I think are good to have those kind of restraints with this.
How cruel would it be to trade a 15-year-old?
So cruel.
It's like, hey, you're not working out as a child. You can go play in like, San Jose. Thanks. Like that's no.
Yeah.
No.
And she'll be going to school virtually according to the press materials that I am reading here. So congratulations to Chloe Ricketts out of Saline, Michigan. That's just a huge thing. It's a real thing to be proud of as a state.
Big Michigan Jaguars alum. Again, shouts out to her. She's doing great things. She'll continue to make Michigan Jaguars and AFC Ann Arbor proud. Even if she just goes there and plays those 3 years and goes somewhere else, that's still a tremendous step forward for soccer in the state of Michigan.
100%. Let's talk Detroit City FC. It is actually match week, Fletcher. Oh my gosh. It's here. I can't believe it. Although the game's going to be playing very late because of time zone changes on Saturday. People like me are going to have to stay up a little bit later than usual to finish out the game.
Drink a lot of yerba mate to get yourself ready for the game.
Yeah, exactly. So what do we have to look forward to, man? Because I'm on this thing where I'm optimistic, but I'm also nervous.
So DCFC signed Ryan Shello to be the backup keeper, which is great. I mean, to have a backup keeper, does it really move the needle for me? No, because he's only had one official start in his career.
Well, it does for me a little bit. Let me tell you why. If they play him, I would like to see him get minutes this year, because if he can get some good, solid minutes, it will also help rest Nate.
I mean, that's a big if. And like I said before, Trevor James' system runs off of trust. And while I think he trusts Ryan Shello more than, other keepers, obviously, I'm not sure he trusts him enough to like rest Nate if Nate is healthy to play. Maybe if they're riding into the game, U.S. Open Cup match off of, some positive results, maybe Ryan Shello gets to start there. But my thinking is probably not. Probably sits there until Nate can't make a game again. Going through the motions in warm-up to I'm getting ready to play, but knowing full well Nate is here, so he's going to keep playing. Like you said, it'd be nice to get some rotation in there, especially at the keeper spot to maybe build some confidence. But Trevor James is pretty static when it comes to stuff like that, so I don't really see that happening.
So as we get into the San Diego Loyal FC match, this is where, we always have this conversation, the difference between what's on paper and what's on the pitch. As I said, I have this mix of excitedness. I'm excited about the season. I'm excited about some of the young talent, but I'm also nervous because I can read the paper side of it. So it's like, what team are we going to get out of here? And I think there are good things to point to. And then there's some questions that aren't going to be answered, not until Saturday. And frankly, in some cases, not till a few Saturdays into the season.
Yeah. Even pinning down a starting lineup for this first match is still kind of hard because you have some moving pieces. A lot of pieces are going to be there. Stephen Carroll, Matt Lewis, Nate Steinwasser, Skage Simonsen, Maxi Rodriguez, Reese Williams. They'll all be starting. But a few other players like Cy Goddard, Richard Ballard, Adrian Billhart, of those, who's going to start? Maybe Jalen Robinson, maybe Michael Bryant gets to start at center back. We're not really sure there. Even there, you're still kind of what's happening next? Did they sign any more trialists? Did Vincenzo Candela make the team? Did Will Perkins make the team? You have to assume so, given the fact that it's this late and they both started the last friendly. But also, that doesn't really mean anything because, again, trialists come and go. I'm sure there's some trialist people didn't think would make the team. I'm sure there's some trialist people thought would make the team that did not make the team. So, yeah, there's a lot of questions going into this game. Some questions for San Diego as well. They let go of one of their top scorers, Thomas Amang, who currently was signed to Orange County SC, so he stays in California. So, they have some stuff to retool there. Their coach, Landon Donovan, U.S. soccer great, stepped into an executive role. So, Nate Miller from Lansing Ignite, is stepping up to be the head coach. So, their team's going to shift a little bit. Obviously, he was on the roster before as a coach, but he wasn't the head coach. So, now they can kind of do things in his own way. This is a game of question marks between the team from the West and the team from the East. I think Detroit will come out fired up. I don't know if they get a win. I think they get a positive result in a tie. Kind of like last year, except, they got a loss against San Antonio. But it was a positive loss in my eyes because they played well for 89 minutes and 30 seconds. And there was one 30-second blip where they all turned their brains off and San Antonio scored. I don't think that'll be the case here. But also, we still have questions about where goals will be scored. Because even during their friendlies against college teams, they manufactured some goals, but they didn't score 10, 12 goals against college teams. They scored maybe, I think, a total of 8. And against the professional teams, they didn't score until late. They didn't take control of those games. And albeit they did play two good professional teams in their friendlies, it still makes you worry a little bit because the goals aren't necessarily there. And I know that's the biggest thing with people who have been hounding about Detroit is they defend really, really well, but you don't win games unless you score. You can have the best defense in the world, but if you have the best defense in the world, no one scores in you, you typically have 0-0 draws, and you will not make the playoff with 0-0 draws. You have to get some wins somewhere. So I'm sure everyone will be sitting on the edge of their seat looking at goals to try to get, Detroit forward, because there's no more MLS2 teams for you to use as safety nets. You have to now go out there and beat all these independent teams that have, not necessarily all youth players, but have some people who want to go out there and, knock the target off your back.
So, Fletcher, I don't feel like I can put any numbers on this. Usually, I like to do a score preview for both sides, right? I like it when we get the opportunity. You and I go head to head. Sometimes you win, sometimes I win, looking at what's on the table. But here's the thing. I don't feel like I know enough to do that. I don't feel like I know enough to do that about this roster, about, the friendlies for the most part were closed friendlies. Otherwise, I would have tried to go to more of them. I feel like there are still a lot of questions. And in fact, I'm looking here and we're 4 days out. There are no odds listed for this game either. And so, although people are texting me and they're asking me, what do you think the score will be? What do you think the total goals will be? What do you think the line will be? I have to be honest that this is a time where I feel like I'm without words. I don't feel like, outside of the pure fan perspective of I want to win, I don't feel like I can give an educated guess right now.
I looked at some of the friendlies San Diego had. They played MLS champion LAFC, had them tied 1-1 at half, which is good. And then LAFC, of course, being an MLS team, kind of stepped on their neck and ended up winning 3-1, which is a positive result for them. They beat Orange County 3-0 in a friendly, which Orange County's looking to retool. They beat Central Valley Fuego USL League One team, 1-0 in a friendly, positive results. None of those teams, say for LAFC, are defensive stalwarts like Detroit. I think it's 1-1. I think they get a goal early, and I think Detroit counters back. Skage gets a goal or Ben Morris gets a goal. A forward midfielder gets a goal for them, and I think they kind of hold out and just go from there. I don't think a win's on the precipice yet. I think Detroit's still figuring some stuff out. They're still trying to get some players back healthy. I know Devin Mumensa will be back early mid-May after speaking to him at the kickoff party. I think they have some stuff. Defensively, they're good. They're sorted out pretty well. You're not going to break them down still. They have Nate back there. They have 2 of their 3 starting center backs. They have, Jalen Robinson, who's a captain with Loudoun. They have Michael Bryant, who, can go anywhere. They have Reese Williams in the right wing, who can get some crosses in. They have whoever's in the left wing, whether it's Cy Goddard, Richard Ballard, or Will Perkins, who can help facilitate there. You have Lay Jope in front as a midfielder who's more defensive-minded, kind of like a wrecking ball there. You have Maxey still there, Stout, who can help defensively. So I think in the back end, they're fine. The question mark will always be at the front end, whether they're going to score or not. Will I think they'll give it more than 1 goal? No. Will I think they'll have a shutout? Probably not. There's a chance they could. I know San Diego's really keyed up about their home opener. They have a special jersey in place of it. Real good ode to their neighborhood there. I don't see anyone getting 3 points. I see 1-1 split, 1 point each. Positive result for Detroit to start their season in California, which with the time zone difference is not awesome, especially coming back after that. It's hard because it's the beginning of the season. Honestly, we have more question marks than we did at the beginning of last season, which is really hard to fathom because last year they're coming from Nisa to the USL Championship. We're wondering if they can compete. We know they can compete at this level. We're now wondering if they can take the next step to being the apex predator as opposed to being, some of the prey.
I will buy that prediction for $1. I'll take it. The game will be at 10 p.m. our time. And of course, you can watch it on ESPN Plus because that's where you can watch all of the USL Championship games. So I can get my entire soccer habit and fix in. Fletcher Sharp, I know it's been a big episode today, but thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
Of course, and I'll add one extra thing. The game at home against Louisville City has been announced to be on ESPN2. So there's one game you can actually watch on ESPN proper. And, you don't, all your friends who are like, how do I watch DCFC on my TV? There's how. So no more complaining about you can't find them on a television.
All right. Thank you so much for listening. Remember, dailydetroit@gmail.com. Any feedback you have on any of the stories that we talked about. We've got our newsletter, dailydetroit.substack.com. I am Jairus Days, and
I'm Fletcher Sharp.
Thank you so much for listening to Your Daily Detroit. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Keyworth.